Well, we are, as far as I remember, on page 289. We're in Shree Ramakrishna's room, and he's been talking with a devotee that he really respects, whose practice, Ishan, and he was just having Ishan name off some of his stories, some of his favorite top 40. Master was having Ishan give us his top 40 in spiritual ideas, and the last one was about the fact that the earth is the largest thing we see anywhere around us. The larger than the earth is the ocean, and larger than the ocean is the sky. But Vishnu, the Godhead, has covered earth, sky, and the netherworld with one of his feet, and that the foot of Vishnu is enshrined in the practitioner or the sadhu's heart. Therefore, the heart of a holy person is the greatest of all, is the biggest of all. And, this is our practice. This is why we're so interested as Vedantins in the inner world, the bottleneck from which all of this seems to reflect or emanate, according to the sages, and that our highest realization is that this world is in us. We are not in the world. That's when Vivekananda was in Alameda, in the Bay Area in California back in, I don't know what, 1900 something. And he says, I am not in Alameda. Alameda is in me. And so knowing that the universe exists within us. And so those were his words with Ishan. And it says the devotees were delighted with Ishan's words. Ishan intended to retire to a solitary place and to practice a spiritual discipline of the Gayatri, through which Brahman is invoked. But the master said that the knowledge of Brahman was not possible without the complete destruction of worldliness. Further, he said that it was impossible for a man or a woman, a person, to totally withdraw his mind from the objects of the senses in the Kali Yuga, meaning in this day and age. That just because we're involved in a very busy world, where billboards and advertising and magazine pictures and even the idols of the day, the ideals of the day, are pulling us into the world of the senses constantly. And he's saying, so in this day and age, this old path of pure jnana, pure knowledge, completely shutting down the ego and completely shutting down any sense of body mind, is impossible for us. And so he says what to do about that. He says that to totally withdraw the mind from the objects of the senses in the Kali Yuga is impossible. When this life was dependent on food, that is why the master discouraged people from attempting the Vedic worship of Brahman, that one without a second, the unchanging absolute, and asked them to worship Shakti, or the Divine Mother, who is identical with Brahman. And so we know that Shakti, the power of God, Ramakrishna tells us, they're for us, they're two different things. You see the fire and you feel its heat. And so you have two different things because they're coming in through two different senses. But it's actually one thing that's being looked at by two senses. And so it appears to us as being dual, as being separate. He says, but really you can't separate the fire from its heat. And then he says the milk and its whiteness, the same thing. You taste milk and you know milk through taste. And then you see milk and you know milk through whiteness. And so milk becomes dual. But those two qualities are only because of two senses. That actually milk is one, in its essence. And so he's saying that in the old days they would go for that essence to the point where they wouldn't see a world of objects. They would not be aware of their body. They would not be aware of a mind. That they would be in samadhi, in that perfect state of oneness without a second. And he's saying to attain that, the world doesn't allow it anymore. That was a time when all of society would support a person's effort to go and sit in silence, and that they would not have to come out of their cave or come out of their meditation, that people would bring them food and would make sure they had shelter and clothing and all of that. But those days are of the old world. He says, now we have to worship Shakti. We worship God as mother, which is the power of God. God manifesting, right, is considered the divine feminine in in Hinduism or in the Vedanta. And so now we draw, and truly, whether you're drawing near to the whiteness of milk or whether you're drawing near to milk, you're drawing near to that one, right? It's just the way of approaching. And because we are in the world of action all the time these days, and because we see the world of constant unrepeating change, we're caught up in it, and so we live in it. And so he is teaching the way to the same goal, but using the divine feminine instead of the masculine, which are just purely labels. And he makes the point here. He says, Shakti, the divine, who is identical with Brahman. So there is no gender at that level, or you can say both ways. You can say there's no gender at that level, or you can say there are all genders at that level. And so it doesn't matter, because at that level there's one without a second. So there's no one to describe it. So if you say anything about it, you're talking metaphorically, because that he said that Brahman, the ultimate reality, is the one thing that can't be stained by the tongue, meaning that it can't be limited by a word or by a thought. It's a transcendent space that we discover within ourselves. So the master to Ishan, why do you waste your time simply repeating neti neti? Nothing whatsoever can be specified about Brahman except that it exists. So he's discouraging him from doing that ancient practice, the neti neti. I'm not this, and I'm not this, and I'm not this, right? He says, whatever we see or think about is the manifestation of the glory of the primordial energy, the primal consciousness, creation, preservation, and destruction, living beings and the universe, and further, meditation and the meditator, bhakti or devotion, and prema, which is that realization of pure love. All these are manifestations of the glory of that power. He's saying that there's no reason to deny all of this. That sorry about that. I had an alarm set for some reason. that there's no reason to deny all of this, that you can see all of this as characteristics or qualities of the divine, and see them through the lens of a pure love, that they are the expression of a perfect divine love, a perfect grace, and through that learn acceptance of the moment and come to the truth that this divine is everywhere present and always perfect. And through that find the calmness of mind, and through that calmness of mind begin to see the reflection of the Divine Mother in her pure form within the mind, as you sit on the edge, as you sit in the heart, in the shrine of the heart, and look at mind, watch mind from that space. But Brahman is identical with its power, right? So he's saying we're not talking about two different things. It's just a different approach to one and the same thing. On returning from Ceylon, Hanuman praised Rama, saying, "O Rama, you are the supreme Brahman, and Sita is your Shakti. You and she are identical. Brahman and Shakti are like the snake and its wriggling motion. Thinking of the snake, one must think of its wriggling motion. And thinking of its wriggling motion, one must think of the snake. Or they are like milk and its whiteness. Thinking of milk, one has to think of its color. That is whiteness. And thinking of the whiteness of milk, one has to think of milk itself. Or they are like water and its wetness. Thinking of water, one has to think of wetness. And thinking of the wetness of water, one has to think of water. The primal power, Mahamaya, has covered Brahman. As soon as the covering is withdrawn, one realizes, I am what I was before. I am thou, and thou art I. Right? So this is the highest realization, that you are a oneness. That there never was a separate you, that this separate you was based on your identity with 5 chosen senses. And so you began through those senses to identify yourself. You began to identify yourself as a male or a female or in between. You began to identify yourself with an age and with a profession and with a nationality and with a race. And as you grabbed these subsets of identities, you became a person. You became a separate entity. and you believed yourself to be separate from the whole. You forgot that you are of the whole, that the whole is you, and that it's unlimited, that you are all attributes and not just the small set of thoughts that you've grabbed from your mind, that you've created an experience from. As long as that covering remains, the Vedantic formula, I am he, that is, man is the supreme Brahman, does not apply rightly, right? So he's saying the problem with sitting and doing the practice, I am that, which is the ultimate truth, the highest realization is that thou art that. But when we say I am that, the problem is that when we say I, we don't know what we mean. We have a collection of limitations and restrictions, and that becomes what we call our personality. So this personality that we love so much in ourselves is just a collection of restrictions and limitations. Meaning, I like sunsets, which means you don't like daylight. You like sunsets. So you've set up a restriction for yourself. I like romantic movies, which means you don't like action films. So you've set up a restriction for yourself. I'm a man, which means you're not a woman. So you've set up a limitation for yourself. And so we've trapped ourselves in these little cages of restrictions and limitations as an identity. And so it's not proper for us to do that practice, I am that, because we don't know what we mean by I. And if we don't know what we mean by I, we certainly can't know what we mean by that, right? And so he's saying this isn't the fastest and best way in these times to realize God, to realize the truth. He says the wave is part of the water, but the water is not part of the wave, right? As long as that covering remains, one should call on God as mother. So as long as you see yourself being defined by a set of attributes, it's not proper for you to say, I am that, because you will basically build up a very large ego, right? And then you'll begin to move into a state of license where because you are that, you can do anything, because you're being ego driven, because you don't know what you mean when you say, I am that. So he's saying, don't do this. Instead, see this external world that you've imagined, understand that it also is real. It's not what you think it is, but it is real. And through the worship of that, through the loving of that, through the seeing the Divine Mother, through that, you'll arrive at the same place. Addressing God, the devotee should say, you are the mother and I am your child. You are the master and I am your servant. It is good to have the attitude of the servant toward the master. From this relationship of master and servant spring up other attitudes, the attitude of serene love for God, the attitude of a friend toward a friend, and so on. When the master loves his servant, he may say to him, come, sit by my side. There is no difference between you and me. But if the servant comes forward of his own will to sit by the master, will the master not be angry? It's this idea, the best illustration I've ever seen of this was the Pope was giving a lecture one time on a stage, and he was standing at a microphone, and behind him was the Pope chair, that big throne that was sitting back there. And someone's young boy, probably 3 or 4 years old, managed to break loose from his mother backstage and runs out onto the stage while the Pope is giving the lecture, and goes over and is looking at the Pope chair. And of course, that looks wonderful to a 3-year-old kid. And so with great effort, he, climbs up into that chair and sits himself with his arms up on the arms of the chair in the Pope chair. The audience chuckles, and when the Pope turns around and sees him, there's no concern. It's adorable. It's a wonderful thing. And he laughs, and eventually, security comes out with the mother, and they pick up the child, and off they go, and everything's finished. But if somebody else, if a grown person had walked on stage and gone over and sat in that chair, that wouldn't have been funny. It wouldn't have been adorable, right? Because it would have been a purposeful action of ego, an expression of self. And he says that is the problem with saying I am that. It's you as a person who doesn't understand, who has a sense of self, even though it's a wrong one, takes a privilege of sitting into the chair, whereas the child had no sense of I, no sense of egoism. It wasn't a matter of deserving or not deserving. It was a matter of what a great, big, beautiful chair. I'm going to sit in it. That's cool. And he sits in it. And so the practice is to come to that state where we can live in the divine world with that state of innocence, with losing that sense of privilege by understanding our unity, by understanding our oneness, but doing it through the proper channels, through the practices that will diminish ego, diminish the covering, right? So he says, until then, we approach God as our mother. We approach God as our friend. We approach God as our lover. We approach God as our husband, or, any of these relationships that we have in human life. We can approach God through any of them and perfect love through any of them, just through meditating on the nature of God as an unconditioned love, which is something that we can't find in this world. There's no example of an unconditioned love in this world. And so we have to go inward to our ideals, the ideals that we brought with us into the world, because the world can't teach us about an ideal, right? We had to bring them in with us when we were born from our nature, from what we are. And so as we relate to God as perfect love, we then slowly learn what we are in relationship to perfect love. If there's a perfect love, it's love is what removes all divisions. Love is what removes all boundaries. Love is what brings us all together as one. What teaches us oneness and then helps us to realize that oneness. God's play on earth as an incarnation is the manifestation of the glory of the Chit Shakti, the divine power. That which is Brahman is also Rama, Krishna, and Shiva. And you could go on, Chaitanya and Jesus and Buddha and all of these beautiful, purest manifestations of God in the material world. Like as Ramakrishna describes it, the hole through which the divine is seen. So these great illuminaries, these incarnations of God, these purest manifestations, are not defined by their limitations and restrictions. They're defined by being an absence of ego, an absence of division, and through that absence we see God. That's why Jesus said, "I and the Father are one. He who has seen me has seen the Father," because he sees himself as a whole. I'm not a thing. I'm not a limitation and a restriction. When you look at me, you're not looking at this. You're looking through this at the divine reality behind. And so the incarnation is that. It's a whole in the covering of Maya, in the covering of delusion, that allows us to look through it at the possibility of a pure and infinite love that has no condition, which expresses itself through a divine and infinite grace, which for us to accept an infinite grace, that process of accepting infinite grace will teach us infinite humility. And infinite humility is the death of the ego, the death of the boundary line that separates us from the oneness of all. Ishan, yes, sir. Both Hari and Hara are derived from the same root. The difference lies only in the pratyaya. Master, yes, there is only one without a second. That's the ultimate reality. In a dream you can see mountains and people and oceans, and there's problems and there's stories and there's whatnot. But in the morning you realized all of that was composed of your mind alone, that there was you, the sleeper alone. There was not any more than that. And so in this world, it's similar. The dream is a wonderful metaphor of the nature of this universe, that when we drop our idea of limitations and restrictions, we realize ourselves to be the dreamer and not the dreamed. And we realize that all of this existed within the cosmic mind, the divine mind. The Vedas speak of it as Om Sat Chit Ananda Brahma, the Puranas as Om Sat Chit Ananda Krishna, and the Tantra as Om Sat Chit Ananda Shiva. The Chit Sakti as Mahamaya has deluded all with ignorance, right? This divine power through Mahamaya, this world of seeming divisions, the world that, the way I like to think about it is that really in truth, you are that, right? And so you're the king. You're this grand king, And as soon as you develop the idea that you are not this grand king, you're this guy in an orange, a sweater that gives YouTube classes. As soon as you identify yourself with this, everybody in the universe panics because they're like, oh my God, he doesn't think he's king anymore, but he's still the king. Everybody quick, line up so it looks like he exists, everybody do your part so he's separate, so that he's his own thing, and creates this Mahamaya, this world of delusion, so that you can play your part as a piece separate and apart from the whole, which is utterly untrue. But the whole world, because you are that ultimate power, has to align and create a universe just for you. And that's the universe you live in, the universe of your mind and senses, the body mind. He says, so this Mahamaya has deluded all with this ignorance, with forgetting who you are. That's that process of Eve in the garden that Adam and Eve went through. When Eve was looking at that fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, what is the knowledge of good and evil? That's egoism. That's seeing yourself as separate from God. So you've got good and evil happening, right? And so she looks at that fruit. It's that 3-step process. And I always bring this up because through this process, you can really see what has to happen and not be stuck in it. The first thing that did, she said she looked at that fruit and saw that it was beautiful, right? And so she sees that it's beautiful. If she had stopped there, no problem. It's wonderful to look out and see the beauty of the world. Look through that beauty and know that it's the beauty of God. It's the beauty of the Divine Mother, and be fine with that. But then the second thing she says, it looked as if it would be good for food. What does that mean? It looks like it would be something to own, to take, to grab. And as soon as you step into your senses to see the beauty of the world, as soon as you think there's something there that you could have that will make you whole, because that's the third step, that it would make her like God, right? That it would make her whole, it would complete her. That is what caused her to take and eat the fruit of egoism that gave her an idea of separation from God. And then Adam wanted that same thing and took the fruit and ate it through that same process, just for story's sake. But the reality was they separated themselves from God. What was the first thing that happened? Fear. Suddenly they were this small thing in a huge, giant universe. And it says that God came walking in the cool of the eve. And what did they do? They ran away and hid instead of running to him. Had they understood divine love, they would have run to him. And if they had run to him, it would have been a very different story. But they ran and hid. And then when he saw them, he says, "Why'd you hide?" They said, "Oh, we were naked." Who told you were naked? How do you know you were naked? You've always been naked. And then instead of beating them up for it, he literally makes them clothing, to cover them. But then he tells them, because you've done this, the results of this is you now live in a world of desire, where you're going to be clawing through your senses to fill your desires. And you're going to be doing that all the days of your life, toiling. Why? Because you can't fulfill yourself through desires, right? And so he puts at the gate of the garden, I'm sorry, I just keep repeating the story, but it's so apropos of our condition, is that he says that to prevent them from going back into the garden, finding that inner paradise again, he puts a cherubim that has that flaming sword at the gate to Eden. And what is that flaming sword? That flaming sword is desire. So until you vanquish desire, you cannot return to Eden. You cannot find the kingdom of the beloved within. You can't find Eden or paradise within you. Why? Because there was another tree in that garden. There was the tree of immortality. And if God let you eat of the tree of immortality while you were still subject to desire, your curse would last forever, right? So you have to defeat desire so that you can find that inner bliss. Remember who you are. Come back to that notion of oneness. And then again, you get to eat the fruit of immortality and be free. And so this story of the Garden of Eden didn't happen once and project on forever. It happens continuously, every moment, as we go through our senses to identify ourselves with the senses, identify our needs with the senses. Our desires happen. We reach out to take them. We eat them. And that's what we're doing. We're going and working 8, 10, 12 hours a day. What? to buy our cars, to feed our families, to buy our clothes, to go on our vacations, all of these desires that just continually pile up, and they can never be fulfilled. Why? Because as quickly as you're collecting them, they're rotting, rusting, breaking, going away. So you as much as you collect goes, and then the body falls off. And depending on what you want to believe happens after that, there it is, round and round we go, as it were. So he says, yes, there is only one without a second. The Vedas speak of it as Om Satchitananda Brahma. So Satchitananda is that the nature of the self, which is love, wisdom, and being. So it's Om Satchitananda Brahma, the one unchanging absolute. So that is the highest school of Vedanta. The Puranas say Om Satchitananda Krishna. That this reality is Krishna, this reality is Jesus, this reality is Buddha. And the Tantra say Om Satchitananda Shiva, the king of renunciation. The denial of all this is that manifestation. The Chit Shakti, so this divine power as Mahamaya, the deluder, the one that after it's come through, after the one has been broken into 5 digestible pieces that come in through your 5 senses, the mind is scrambling to create the unity that it knows intuitively exists, but it's getting 5 disparate pieces of information, and it's trying to reconstruct a universe in its mind. And that universe is the one you live in. And it's a universe of ignorance, because the infinite cannot fit into the finite, cannot be defined. And so we're stuck in this world that we just don't know and can't understand. And as long as we go to the mind to try and figure it out, we're lost in it. We're stuck in the cycles. It is said in the Adhyatma Ramayana that when the rishis saw Rama, they prayed to him in these words only: O Rama, please do not delude us with your world-bewitching Maya. Ishan, what is this Maya? Master, whatever you see, whatever you think or hear is Maya. In a word, lust and greed is the covering of Maya. There is no harm in chewing the betel leaf, eating fish, or smoking, or rubbing the body with oil. What will one achieve by renouncing only these things? The one thing needful is the renunciation of lust and greed. That renunciation is the real and supreme renunciation. Householders, meaning people who aren't monks, should go into solitude now and then to practice spiritual discipline in order to cultivate devotion to God. They should renounce mentally, but the sannyasa, the monk, should renounce both mentally and physically. I once said to Keshav, who was a leader of a great religious organization called the Brahmo Samaj, who was good friends with Ramakrishna, I once said to Keshav, how can a typhoid patient be cured if he remains in a room where there's a pitcher of water and a jar of pickles? Now and then one should live in solitude, right? So for those folks, those of us living in the world, trying to make a living and having to take care of all these things, that's the world of the senses. It's the world that's kind of pulling us more into our idea of body mind. He says, to counter that, take some time, go into a silent place, go into a place away from your cell phone, away from the babies, away from the neighbors, away from the dog, away from that horrible husband, away from all of these things. Go into that silent place for a while and go inside. Find yourself, silence the mind. He says, when you begin to silence that mind, and you silence that mind by becoming disinterested in the thoughts, coming to understand that they're just thoughts. They don't have an existence. They're just a wave in the mind. See that through discernment. Discover that by carefully observing your inner world. And then understand who is watching the mind. Who is it that's looking at these waves? And begin to try and become aware of who is watching your mind, who is listening to your ear, who is smelling through your nose, who is looking through your eyes, and learn to become aware of that awareness. And as soon as you even begin to touch the awareness of awareness, you'll discover this beautiful sense of bliss, this beautiful sense of love that just quietly exists within you, an unchanging, steady note of pure contentment, right? But as soon as you go into the senses again, or as soon as you become interested in a thought, that distraction, no matter how minute it is enough to take your attention off of that ever-present contentment, that ever-present bliss of love that is your nature. And so this is what he's telling us as householders. Go into the mind, observe your inner world, learn to see that there's a body, there's a mind, and there's this self who's watching both of them. Start to look at the characteristics of body, mind, and understand that all desires come from either the mind or the body. They never come from the self. They're always generated by body or mind. Watch them closely and learn to understand which one is you. And then pull yourself separate from mind and make yourself a pure witness of it. Pull yourself apart from body and make yourself a pure witness of it. And in the silence that ensues from your disinterest in mind and body, that awareness, you begin to know who you are when nothing is telling you who you are. No thought, no sound, no external world. But you become authentic for the first time in your being, and you understand that your nature is pure love, which is why loving was always so satisfying to you, and why loving was something you always enjoyed having from others. And you begin to understand the nature of intelligence, the joy of learning, of transcending, of growing from your faults, finding your way out of ignorance. And then the best of all, you begin to find and appreciate your immortality, your existence, which is infinite and boundless, ever free and ever pure. Devotee, sir, what do you think of the Navavidhan? It seems to me like a hodgepodge of everything. I have to tell you honestly, I don't know what that word is. I feel like it's the first time I'm reading it tonight. So a devotee has come up with this thing called Navavidhan. Rangu, do you know what it is? Why do I suspect you might know what that is? Okay, I don't want to embarrass you. Your name just popped in my mind, so I thought maybe you...
Maharaj,
Yes.
It
do you
was
know?
another, yeah, because Brahmo Samaj became, divided into two sections, and one of them was Navavidhan.
Oh, right. Okay. When Keshup and his friend had their fight
Yeah.
and put into two organizations. Okay, so
Yeah.
this was that second organization. All right. So what do you think of this? It seems to me like a hodgepodge of everything, Master. Oh, some say it is a modern thing. That sets me wondering. Then is the god of the Brahmo Samaj a new god? The Brahmos speak of their cult as the Navavidhan, as the new dispensation. Well, it may be so. Who knows? There are 6 systems of philosophy, so perhaps it's like one of these. This is what I love about Ramakrishna, is just the lack of judgment. He's like, oh, well, maybe. It's a possibility. Because for Ramakrishna, the important thing about spiritual life was your sincerity and your earnestness. That was the most important thing. And the other most important thing, there's 3 most important things, and they're equal. It's just that we can't say them at once. So one is your earnestness and your sincerity in your practice, and the second is truth. And what is truth? It's that alignment of what you say and what you think and what you do. It's coming, living from the inside out, not living in a calculated mind. And then the third one is love, which is actually the one most important thing, because the other 2 always obey love, always are inspired through love. And so those 3 things are the important things. So all these other manifestations, what does God look like? How do we worship God? Should we be a Christian? Should we be a Muslim? Should we be a Sufi? Should we be an atheist? These things, it's like, it doesn't matter. Those things will all change. Those identities will all change. Even if you choose yourself a Christian, what that means the day you choose it and what that means to you the day you die are going to be different. So don't worry about these things that change, these things that are always morphing. Look for that in you, which has never changed. that sense of being that has been there when you were 2, when you were 10, when you were 20, and it will be there when the body drops off, right? So he's not quick to judge. He doesn't really get into that, because that's not the important thing. Who knows? There are 6 systems of philosophy, and perhaps it's like one of these. But do you know where those who speak of the formless God make their mistake? It is where they say that God is formless only, and that those who differ with them are wrong. But I know that God is both with and without form, and that he may have many more aspects. It is possible for him to be everything. To Ishan, the Chit Shakti Mahamaya has become the 24 cosmic principles. One day, as I was meditating, my mind wandered away to Rashki's house. He is a scavenger, and I said to my mind, "Stay there, you rogue." The Divine Mother revealed to me that the men and women in this house were mere masks. Inside them was the same divine power, Kundalini, that rises up through the 6 spiritual centers of the body. Is the primal energy man or woman? Once at Kamarpakor, I saw the worship of Kali in the house of the Lahas. They put a sacred thread on the image of the Divine Mother, right? Only men get the divine thread. So why were they putting the divine thread on the mother? And one man asked, "Why have you put the sacred thread on the mother's person?" The master of the house has said, "Brother, I see that you have rightly understood the mother, but I do not yet know whether the Divine Mother is male or female." It is said that the Mahamaya swallowed Shiva. When the 6 centers in her were awakened, Shiva came out through her thigh. Then Shiva created the Tantra philosophy. Take refuge in the Chit Shakti, the Mahamaya. Ishan, please bestow your grace on me. Master, say to God with a guileless heart, "O God, reveal yourself to me," and weep. Pray to God. "O God, keep my mind away from lust and greed," and dive deep. Can a man get pearls by floating or swimming on the surface? He must dive deep. Now, what is this diving deep? It's going beneath the waves of the mind, going beneath thinking, removing your identity from what's going on up here, the ever-changing waves of the mind that create an unrepeating, eternally changing world. Go below those waves, down into the self, where that sense of you has dwelt, that sense of you which has remained the same always in you. Find that place, establish the shrine in the heart there, and sit there and watch the mind. Sit there and watch the display of what the senses play before you. But stay established there and find your identity there, and commune with God, commune with your beloved. However you see that beloved, whatever your highest ideal of love is, whether it's as simple as your grandmother, or whether it's a Jesus, or whether it's a Buddha, or a Rama, or a Krishna, and any of those manifestations are fine, as long as they represent to you the very highest ideal of love, a perfect love, a love with no condition. As long as that is the point of focus, you're on your way home. One must get instruction from a guru. No, this is one people hate to hear. I'm my own guru. I have an inner guru, which is true, right? He'll probably say that here. We'll get it in a second. One must get instruction from a guru. Once a man was looking for a stone image of Shiva. Someone said to him, "Go to a certain river. There you will find a tree. Near it is a whirlpool. Dive into the water there, and you will find the image of Shiva." So I say that one must get instruction from a teacher. That is true, sir. Master, it is Sat Chit Ananda that comes to us in the form of the guru. If a man is initiated by a human guru, he will not achieve anything if he regards his guru as a mere man. The guru should be regarded as the direct manifestation of God. Only then can the disciple have faith in the mantra given by the guru. Once a man has faith, he achieves all. The Sudra, Ekalavya, learned archery in the forest through a clay image of Drona. He worshipped the image as the living Drona. That by itself enabled him to attain mastery in archery. This notion of the guru, where it comes from, and the reason that you have to see your guru as God. Thakur Ramakrishna says in another place, even if your guru visits a grog shop, even if he hangs out at the bar, you should see him as God. And what's the importance of that? Why would he say such a thing? The importance is that you have to find something besides your ego to guide your spiritual life. And that it's by that willingness to surpass ego that you take away the power of the ego. So even if that guru may not be telling you great things, putting your faith in that guru, seeing that guru as the divine, will help you to bypass your own egoism, which is your real problem. And if you do that, the divine will replace your guru with the guru that's best for you, the guru that's necessary for you. And so the guru is really your means of breaking out of your ego self, because the ego is always collecting all kinds of trinkets to prove that it exists, that it is separate from the whole. I am me, and I'm a great me, and I'm a good me, and I'm a big me, and I'm going to be awesome. And then the mind has all kinds of tricks that become part of that ego. It's the ego that makes you ashamed of things. Why? Because then the ego can rescue you from your shame. It's the ego that tells you're not good enough. Why? Because then the ego can make you good enough through effort. All of these little tricks of the mind come into play. So you have to take something outside of that ego sphere to help you escape from that ego. If you build a religion based on what the ego wants, it's just going to make you a smug, Saturday Night Live church lady. Very judgmental. Why judgmental? Because the ego believes in separateness. That's what causes fanaticism. Fanaticism is ego mixed with religion. It's taking this beautiful thing that is supposed to cause harmony, supposed to manifest oneness, and because we've put ego in charge of it, it focuses on difference, and it begins to judge and separate, and then unfortunately kill and mangle and all the wonderful things that come out of that mistake. So this is the need for having a guru that transcends your ego, so that you don't turn your religion into an exercise of separateness. You allow your religion to manifest as oneness, a one without a second, bound by the cord of love. This is the truth, and this is what we must strive for. That's why Ishan says, that is true, sir. The master, it is Satchitananda that comes to us in the form of the guru. So it is this love, wisdom, and being that manifests as your teacher. If a man is initiated by a human guru, he will not achieve anything if he regards his guru as a mere man, because your ego is not going to give way to another ego. And so this is where faith has to come into play, where you see God through your guru, and you believe that God is acting through your guru, right? The guru should be regarded as the direct manifestation of God. Only then can the disciple have faith in the mantra given by the guru, faith in that name of God that he gives you, that's going to lead you to freedom. If you think that just came from a man and that it's just a sequence of sounds, that's not going to do it for you. You have to have faith. You have to believe this will take me home. This is going to work. Once a man has faith, he achieves all, right? This faith. And this, faith is it's a beautiful notion. It's a wonderful, I could go on for 3 days on that one, but anyway, once a man has faith, he achieves all. So the sutra, Ekalavya, he wanted to learn how to be an archer, but he couldn't because he was an untouchable. So he didn't have access to that. So he created a little stone image of the greatest archer in the world at the time. And he worshipped that stone and believed in that stone to be his guru, who would teach him how to become a great archer. And eventually he becomes a great archer. He worshipped that image as the living Drona, and that by itself enabled him to attain mastery in archery. Don't mix intimately with Brahmin pundits. Don't mix intimately with those who think religion is in the head. High philosophies, lots of rules, lots of rituals, lots of needs and regulations. Don't go intimate with that. That traps you in the mind, and the mind is the world of the senses, right? And that's not where we want to have our identity. So don't mix intimately with Brahmin pundits. Their only concern is to earn money. I have I have seen Brahmin priests reciting the Chandi while performing the Swasthayana. It is hard to tell whether they are reading the sacred book or something else. They turn half the pages without reading them. Everyone laughs. It's like I've seen pujas, worships done that way. Actually, the first time that I went to Dakshineshwar in India, and I wanted to make my offering to Kali at Dakshineshwar, the same Kali that Ramakrishna worshipped. And I remember, there was such a long line, and everybody was pushing and jostling. And when I got up to that window, I wanted it to be such a special moment. I'd traveled all the way around the world to be there and to offer my little basket of nonsense to the Divine Mother. I kind of got pushed up there, and the guard sort of centered me in the window and sort of held me, literally kind of held me there. And the priest just took the basket out of my hand, rooted through it until he found the money, took the money, put it in his pocket, grabbed my flowers without even looking at the image of the Divine Mother, just throws it over his shoulder. And the and the guard literally, my turn was over, boom, I was off and gone again. And I was like, what was that? What happened to my devotion? What happened to my moment with the divine? And so don't get intimate with that idea of religion, the Brahmin pundits. Don't let your ritual become just a matter of, let's get this thing finished. Don't let your meditation become like with one eye on the clock, waiting for the time to be done. Don't let that become your religion. Your religion isn't rules. It isn't practices. It isn't rituals. It's finding a love, finding that the Divine Mother, that her image that you're seeing on the shrine, that the shrine outside is purely alone a reflection of the shrine that's in the heart. And so through the mantra, by hearing the name of God, follow that mantra, the love that it awakens as it reminds you of the presence, follow that inside. And in that day, when you find it, when you get there, you'll sit there. And the longer you sit there, it'll occur to you, there's not two of us in here. Oh my. And you won't finish that sentence because you'll be one without a second. There's no longer someone to talk to. You'll be free. What time are we? Oh, it's 8 o'clock exactly. All right. Well, we'll stop there. As much as I'd love to just keep going. And he was going to sing a song too. Oh well. So we'll stop with the pundit only reading half the pages during the Chandi.